Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Erin Creighton, and I'm the Adult Services Department Head and Assistant Branch Manager for the Fredericksburg branch of the Central Rappahannock Regional Library. I am so thrilled today to be joined by one of my favorite nonprofits in the area, Downtown Greens. Janet Doberly is the Outreach Manager, and she is here to talk to us today about vibrant veggies, which is such a fun topic for spring.
It is. It's very timely. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone tuning in. Today, I'm going to be talking about some of my very favorite vegetables and some that I just find fascinating. So, this isn't really a gardening talk so much as oh my gosh, did you know this kind of a talk. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. The first vegetables I would like to talk about are all in the most popular vegetable family in America, and those are the nightshades. In the nightshades, we have tomatoes, peppers, white potatoes, eggplants, tomatillos, tobacco, and ground cherries. And many of you out there might be saying, well, Janet, tobacco is not a vegetable, to which you are correct. But why I mention tobacco is because in the nightshade family, tobacco has the most nicotine. Obviously, we all know tobacco has nicotine. But what some people don't realize is that it's not the only plant in the nightshade family that has nicotine. In fact, if you were to eat 7 eggplants, like you do, that is actually the equivalent of smoking 1 cigarette. So if you have ever been absolutely addicted to that eggplant parmesan at that restaurant, there is a chance that you actually were addicted to the eggplant parmesan because it has nicotine in it. Fun facts, folks. The next vegetable I would like to talk about, or is it the next fruit I would like to talk about? What do we think? Fruit or veggie? This is a very common debate in certain circles. Are tomatoes fruits or vegetables? And I can practically hear everyone tuning in the future shouting, well, I know exactly what a tomato is. A tomato is a fruit. Well, guess what, folks? You are all criminals, and I have called the cops because technically, in the United States, the tomato is a vegetable. According to a 1893 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, it was legally claimed to be a vegetable, and that decision still stands today. So in the U.S., tomatoes are vegetables. Botanically, they are fruits, technically berries. But in the U.S., you better call it a vegetable or it's jail time for you. And I'm sure the case was something like fruit salad versus green salad or something. Not sure why they had that case, but it has been decided. So now you know. Another nightshade is excellent for muscle cramps. Sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night, you have a Charlie horse, and the first thing you're supposed to have is a lot of potassium. So you grab no, not the banana. Don't grab the banana. What you should grab is a potato, because potatoes actually have more potassium than bananas. A medium potato at 5.3 ounces has 620 milligrams of potassium compared to the same amount of a banana, which is only 537 milligrams of potassium. A 4 to 5 ounce banana is considered a medium banana, so it would actually be a large banana that would give you 537 milligrams. So at the end of the day, you wake up in the middle of the night with a Charlie horse, your best bet is to eat a potato. Also, potatoes are great. So it's another excuse to eat more potatoes, which is always popular in my opinion. Another nightshade. You wouldn't think it, but peppers, especially hot peppers, and other nightshades cannot take the heat. If you grow nightshades, you may notice that once the highs start getting into the 90s, the plants stop producing. They don't make flowers. They don't make fruit. They just kind of sit there and do nothing. This is because they can't do it when it's too hot. Much like me, as soon as the highs are in the 90s, we stop working. But as a gardener, your job is to just keep that plant alive, keep it watered, and then once the highs drop back down, the plants will start producing again, and they will keep producing until the first frost. So don't give up hope if they stop producing. Just take it easy and have some lemonade. All right, enough about the nightshades. Let's talk about all the other vegetables. Not all the other vegetables, some of the other vegetables. Ooh, kale, supposed superfood, very popular. But some of you may have noticed that it's gross. If you buy kale from the store and put it in a bowl and take a big bite, it may seem a bit bitter to you and a bit tough. That's because it is, but it doesn't always have to be. In fact, if you do find kale to be too bitter, what you can do is grow it in the winter. Kale planted in a fall crop will grow throughout the winter, and you can eat it throughout the winter, and it never freezes. And that's because when the temperatures drop, kale starts breaking down its own cellular walls and releasing sugar. The sugar actually acts as a natural antifreeze, much like salt. Salt and sugar are both natural antifreezes. So that kale has its own antifreeze, but because it just released all those sugars, it made the kale a lot sweeter. So once you eat that kale, you'll notice that it's actually much more like a sugar snap pea than a bitter green leaf. It doesn't work if you buy kale at the farmer's market or store and then stick it in your freezer. That unfortunately would not work. You would have to have the kale growing in the garden for this to work. But a way you can replicate it at home, if you do just end up buying kale, is by putting it in a bowl, removing the stems, give it a little drizzle of oil and a little bit of salt, and then massage it with your fingers. Essentially what you're doing is physically breaking down those cell walls and releasing those sugars yourself. So the kale will be sweeter and it will be more tender and enjoyable. Yay for kale, right? Ooh, this one's fascinating. When I first learned it, I was shocked. So corn, which we all know and love and see growing everywhere, has, of course, the silk strands coming out of each ear of corn. And each piece of silk is actually directly correlated to one single kernel of corn. So this means that each strand must be pollinated individually for every kernel to develop on that ear of corn. The pollen comes from the tassel at the top of the plant. It falls down and hopefully hits the strands of silk coming out of the ears of corn. That is why when you see corn grown successfully, it is grown in clumps and bunches. It's not grown in a straight single row like many other vegetables. They clump it together, they bunch it together, so that way there is a higher chance of the pollen falling down from the tassel at the top to hit the silk strands on the ears of corn. If you ever see corn that the first few inches of the cob don't have kernels, or there's like a row of kernels missing, or even the ones that are all higgly-piggly and they have like some big kernels and some little kernels and none of them are in a row, all of that is just pollination issues. The corn is perfectly edible, perfectly safe, usually perfectly delicious. It just was not pollinated as well as it might have been. I'm just very, very proud of corn for working so hard to bring us such a delicious food, because that's a lot. The next vegetable, oh, wait a minute. You are not a vegetable. You are a mushroom. So once mushrooms were in the plant kingdom, but it became obvious fairly quickly that they were not actually a plant. Not only did they not use chlorophyll for energy, they weren't green, but they also didn't have the same physiology as plants. So what to do? Well, obviously what you do is put it in the animal kingdom. For a while, mushrooms were in the animal kingdom. Mushrooms are made of chitin. Chitin is the same material that makes up the exoskeletons of bugs and seafood. And so they were like, well, that's an animal feature. So now mushrooms are an animal. But it doesn't take long to realize that mushrooms are not an animal either. And so finally they did get their own kingdom. The fungal kingdom is what I call it. But it shares it with moss and not moss, mold, and a few other fascinating growers that aren't quite plants and aren't quite animals. But because mushrooms are made of chitin, that means that we are unable to digest them unless we cook them. So cooking the mushroom makes it so you don't experience any gastrointestinal issues, but it also means that you are releasing and absorbing the nutrients of that mushroom. So if you were to eat raw mushrooms, even if they didn't give you a bellyache, they aren't doing anything for you. You're not getting any of the benefits, the nutrition out of those mushrooms until you cook it down. Fun fact. Woohoo! This is my favorite vegetable family, the onion family. They also have garlic too. And of course, if you've ever cut an onion, you can a test that they can make you cry because they can be quite stinky. And this stinkiness is actually dictated by the amount of sulfur in the soil that they grew in. Of course, we all know sulfur can be stinky all on its own, so it makes sense that that level of sulfur is what dictates the stinkiness of the onion. And a matter of fact, in the United States, most onions, especially the sweet onions like Vidalias, are grown in areas with sulfur deficiencies in the soil. So that way the onions come out a lot sweeter and milder and easier on the eyes. Like tier-wise, they look the same though. Woohoo! Oh, baby carrots aren't really babies. They aren't really carrots either. No, that's not true. They are carrots. I lied about that last bit, but they aren't really babies. Baby carrots are just the larger, uglier carrots that have been shaved down. If you are of a certain age, you may remember that when you were a kid, there were no baby carrots in the stores. You only had regular carrots. During that time, there was actually a lot of carrot waste because we don't want to buy the ugly carrots. We only want to buy the pretty, straight, beautiful orange carrots. But then some genius had the idea to take the ugly carrots and start shaving them down into little baby carrots. And that's what we see today. And as many of you know, baby carrots are actually a lot more popular than normal sized carrots these days. But it's not nearly as wasteful as it used to be, because not only are we eating the baby carrots, but then those shavings, which only constitute about less than 1% of the carrot, actually get used in other food products like carrot cake or vegetable crackers or something that needs carrot but doesn't need to look like carrot. So it's actually not only great for us because we're eating more carrots, but it's great for the carrots because we're wasting less carrot. Yay for carrots. Speaking of shaving, this is going to take a turn. Not really. Speaking of shaving, many vegetables have most of their nutritional value in their skin and the first millimeter or so of their flesh. So when you peel your potatoes, your carrots, your cucumbers, other vegetables like that, you're actually removing a bulk of their nutritional value. So if you are eating the vegetable for the nutrients, your best bet, instead of shaving it or peeling it, would be just to give it a good scrubbing. So that way you get all the nutritional benefits and you still don't have to eat the gritty dirt that's still stuck to it. It's a win-win situation for everybody. Ooh, beets. I love beets. And I think if you don't love beets, then you're wrong. There, I said it. Beets contain high amounts of boron. Boron is actually a micronutrient found in the soil. Most plants require it in small amounts, but beets actually have a lot of boron in them. And boron is a mineral that can increase the level of sex hormones in the human body. So much so that some ancient civilizations actually touted beets and beet juice as an aphrodisiac, which is great. I love beets, but I don't love beets. So we'll see. Sugar beets, speaking of beets, make up for 20% of the world's sugar production. So if you think that you've never had a beet or you don't eat beets, you're wrong. You do, but you just eat the sugar out of them, which can be the best part sometimes. What's next? Ooh, now we're moving on to one of my very favorite vegetables, okra. It is such a favorite vegetable of mine that I have named my cat Okra. So I have a cat named Okra, but I do want to say that during the next few slides, I am talking about the vegetable and not the cat, probably. First and foremost, okra and cotton are actually cousins. They're very closely related. They're both in the mallow family, so they have these beautiful hibiscus flowers that bloom on them. And this will actually come into play in a little bit, and I'll tell you why. So okra, before we get into that, has many health benefits, including being excellent for your digestive tract and your kidney health. Anything that is slick or gooey, like okra is, really helps your digestive tract keep things moving right along. It's slick and gooey. And that's about a detail that I don't want to get on that. But they're highly nutritious and very, very delicious. Okra, actually, we as Americans call it okra, but most countries do not call it okra. In Great Britain, they call it ladyfingers, which I find horrifying. And in most countries, including the countries in Africa, it is called gombo. And of course, gombo sounds extremely familiar because that is where we got the term gumbo. Gumbo is a traditional Southern dish made with shrimp and sausage and tomatoes and onions, all kinds of stuff, but it has okra in it. So if you make gumbo, but you don't add the okra, then you are not making gumbo. The term gombo is actually derived from a term Quilobo, I believe I'm saying that correctly, which describes the East Africa region where okra originally came from. So okra is from Africa, growing in Africa. How did it get to America? Well, many historians believe that okra came to America from the enslaved people hiding the seeds in their hair before they were packed into the ships. And then they came over, and this is actually a theory that applies to many of the vegetables that come from Africa to America, is that seeds were hidden in the hair and on the person, and that's how they came. Once the okra seeds hit the Southeast United States, where there was, heavy slave trade there, it took off like gangbusters because, again, okra and cotton are cousins. And the Southeast United States is an excellent place to grow cotton. It's an excellent place to grow okra. And that is how it became a staple in Southern cuisine, which is just absolutely thrilling to me. Love okra. And on that note, I'll end with my favorite vegetable. Thank you so much for hanging out with me while I just prattled on about all these vegetable facts that I just have to share with folks. If you would like to learn more about vegetables, vegetable gardening, or any other gardening and nature-based educational programming, I highly recommend that you check out our website at downtowngreens.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Thank you so much.
Janet, that was so interesting. I usually jump in and say, oh, like I learned like this really cool fact, but I learned so many cool facts. I had no idea that the tomato was decided as a vegetable by the Supreme Court, or that potatoes have more potassium than bananas.
Yeah, isn't that exciting?
Interesting things.
Yeah, now that's a great excuse to eat potatoes, more potatoes.
Yeah, I love potatoes. And I love to hear that my preferred way of eating the potatoes, which is to, slice them up and, bake them with a little olive oil and some salt and pepper. I usually just give them a scrub too. So it finds out I've been giving myself just more vitamins all these years.
Right. You're a health nut and you didn't even know it.
That's so cool. Thank you again for what a wonderful presentation. I highly recommend everybody checks out their website or comes to some of the amazing gardening programs that Downtown Greens does at the library or at their own locations. Your nature walks in particular are just outstanding. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.